Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Saturday, July 26th, 2025, and moving migrants into the workforce. Doug Ford's a liberal? What? I mean, yeah, I guess, but his argument is fundamentally these people are a drag on the economy because we have to pay for them, and I want to move them into the productive members of the economy. And I think this is absolutely the wrong move. What in the world is going on? Why are we spending billions of dollars on migrants who aren't migrants, who are just coming here because we offer them free hotel stays? I think that there's a really big problem with this incentive structure, and Canadians are out in the cold, and we don't want 100,000 people who have been previously put up on the government dime in hotels competing with our kids who have already nearly 20% unemployment. And that's just intolerable. So what the heck is Doug Ford doing? Nobody wants this. So why is Doug Ford doing this? I don't know. We're going to look, and there's a video, so we'll talk about that. Christian concert. We're going to start with the Christian concert under attack by protesters. It's a pretty wild story what's gone on yesterday. Just crazy stuff. And I don't think it's a good thing. And it certainly is indicating a big shift in the public feeling about what's going on, although I think it's largely driven by erroneous reporting by the CBC, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll explore that a little bit in a minute when we get started. Fire aid scam is being exposed by Trump later in the show, and Trump goes to Scotland. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We've got to do this concert thing. Dan McTeague is highlighting this tweet from Drea Humphreys, and she says, Christian phobia in Canada. The real reason Canada is treating Christian musicians Sean F as a safety threat. Here's what he's talking about just at the beginning of this. And the real reason is that he's somebody who is very, very sane and reasoned and makes a good argument and just wants to worship his God. Here we go.
I mean, your government in this province makes everything legal. They don't have a problem making all drugs legal, all prostitution legal, all darkness. Let's make it all legal, except for worship in the church. And when I saw what happened, what I was most frustrated about, of all my trips coming up here, all the times worshiping all across this province, I've been with many of you here, many of the pastors here for years. We did 100 hours worship in the middle of the Olympics in 2010, Winter Olympics. 100 hours of worship. This is not my first rodeo in British Columbia. And the people here are such passionate worshipers. And so I remember thinking, as everything was shutting down, they are trying to rob God of the worship of British Columbia.
So, okay, he's calling the government out, right? Everything's legal in Canada, just not the church, just not being free, just not being able to do what you want to do. Here's another one. Chris says, I've never heard of Sean before this or until this week when the CBC went on a witch hunt to get all of his Canadian concert tour dates canceled. A friend attended his Coquitlam, BC show in 2023. This is what some Canadians in the CBC deem a public safety risk. I've given up. What? This is 19 seconds of 2023. Is this a public safety risk? Is this concerning? Is this something worth all of this? Wow. It's a really good expose on how insane things have gotten. Here we go.
There is a river that flows unrestrained from your heart. Canyons of mercy so deep I could never.
Public safety risk? Okay. I mean, it just sounds like a concert. They seem to be having a good time. Wild, absolutely wild. Brian Lilly says this is unreal. An actual quote from the Montreal Mayor's office. Freedom of expression is one of our fundamental values, but hateful and discriminatory speech is not accepted in Montreal. And as in other Canadian cities, the show will not be tolerated. So this is CBC. MAGA affiliated musicians concert draws condemnation from City of Montreal, but goes ahead as planned. City says church doesn't have authorization to host concert. The church is allowed to worship, right? And there are a lot of people who are saying that's encoded in our Constitution, the right to worship, the right to religious freedom, the right to congregate peacefully. That's all protected. Can't do anything about that in Montreal. So I've shown you kind of BC stuff. This is Sean yesterday in Montreal, and Sean says a car just rammed into our bus outside of Montreal. Dwayne says, Canada, you lost your mind and your values. And yep. So here he is talking about what happened to his bus.
Hey guys, I'm here outside of Montreal, and we were just hit by a crazy car. It was out of control. It was swerving everywhere. I don't know if it was intentional, I don't know what, but it rammed into our bus, and we were all sleeping and felt it just bam our bus. And so we pulled over, we got police coming, the car, I think everyone's safe, everyone's okay. Man, this is wild. I don't remember the last time I've experienced warfare like this, and I would just ask for you guys to please pray. Can you pray for us? Can you pray for our team? Can you pray for our bus? Can you pray for our truck? And police are here, they speak French, we speak English, so that's gonna be fun, but we'll figure it out, and I'll come back to you guys soon. We're right outside of Montreal, but please be praying. We know that, gosh, the enemy hates worship is going up across Canada.
Right, so police are coming. I mean, was it intentional? I have no idea. Neither does he. Seems interesting coincidence. Right? Here's Mr. Sunshine Baby saying police forcibly enters church where American Christian artist and pastor Sean F. is set to perform tonight. He had to find a new venue tonight after his was canceled for being, quote, mega. COVID-19 flashbacks, anyone? What has Canada become? It happened right in front of our noses, right? We didn't realize what happened, but we were all sitting around watching other things while this anti-Christian whatever has taken hold. Here are the police entering the church. Now, I've got a video in just a second where Sean says, the police have been great. They're here to warn me about the anti-Christian sentiment, and they've been great. So I don't know if this is as sinister as it seems. So the police are going into the church to go and talk to him, I guess. Alexander Lavoie, who's the one who originally reported the church entry and had the video, says nearly a dozen Montreal police officers have entered the church that have offered to host Christian rocker Sean F. after his original venue was canceled tonight. This comes after the socialist mayor declared that his, quote, show will not be tolerated while threatening the place of worship with fines. A heavy law enforcement presence is building around the church. So interesting. Here's Sean, and he says, the police have been super good.
Will you do the show tonight, sir?
Oh, of course, we're not stopping.
Sure.
We don't back down for anything.
Excellent.
But I do want to say this, the police have been amazing. These guys are so kind and so hospitable, and they've just been amazing to
What
us
did they
all
say to
day
you?
long.
What did they say to you?
So we're really grateful. I mean, we're grateful that, that they would show up, that they would warn us about how the anti-Christian bigotry is strong in this city. I haven't done a lot of stuff in Montreal, but that's what they were warning me, that the attacks against Christians is a real thing. And I appreciate that, I think that that's a really good thing to have police officers that are standing up for the freedom to worship. So I commend them.
But it's because you don't have a permit to have the concert.
I don't think you need a permit to worship in a church.
You don't have to, because it's Religious Freedom, Radio Canada. It's religious freedom, do you know that? Religious freedom. You don't need a permit to worship, Radio Canada.
Did you see the look that woman gave him? But she was saying, are you worried that you don't have a permit for this? And he says, you don't need a permit to worship in a church. And this guy says, Antifa have now swarmed the entrance of the church where Sean is performing tonight. And so a bunch of Antifa show up and they're doing Antifa things. Feels paid off. Feels like there's money, motivation, money, right? Money is motivation for people to show up. Here is Firebomb. Sean was firebombed. Right? Shame. Drea says, shame, Christian phobia in Canada. Tonight in Montreal, a man ran into a church during worship, lit a smoke bomb, and threw it at an American worship singer, Sean F., while he was peacefully while he peacefully led praise to the Lord. That's hate. That's intolerance, period. So why did the police stand by? Police stood by and did nothing. So here's video of that.
You just finished Let Us Worship here, but I want to talk about one of the protesters was able to come in and threw at you 2 firebomb.
Yeah.
I want to hear your thoughts about this.
Well, I felt like something was going to happen. So I think in these situations, you always sing with your eyes open. You know, there's a story in the Bible about Saul throwing a spear at David, and he missed it. And so I always think about when I come into hostile environments, hey, I should keep my eyes open. So I saw a guy who was clearly not a church person run down the aisle, a big fat guy in white, with really angry, and he took the smoke bombs out of his pockets and lit them on the side inside of the church during mid-worship song, and then chucked them right at my head. And I dodged them, thankfully, and picked them up. And you know what? I'm so proud of the church here. They didn't stop for a minute. They kept worshiping. Somebody ran out with them, and of course, the police just watched. But yeah, it was not something you normally see in church. Hopefully, this is not the norm in Canada in 2025.
Oh, I got bad news, buddy. I got bad news. But the worst news is that most churches have just replaced worshiping God with rainbow flags, which is just weird, right? Have you noticed that? I've noticed that. Western Standard's reporting Christian artist Sean F., his Montreal concert smoke bombed. The show went on. So he continued, and the police stood by. CP24 says Vaughan denies a permit for the event of mega superstar. So they're trying to frame this guy as a mega superstar, and he's been coming here for more than a decade. He was here in 2010. Mega superstar. Mega didn't exist then. He was just coming here to sing his songs and do his thing, have people worship with him. And what? Now we're making him part of the culture war? Yep. It lets no one rest. Sean himself says, I was just invited by the chief of the Kawartha First Nation tribe to host a church service on native land this Sunday. Their entire tribe has been moved watching our story of boldness across Canada. This service will happen on Sunday, July 27th at 9 a.m. on Treasure Island, private property or private family resort in Kawartha Lakes, Ontario. All are welcome. Ooh. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I love that. That's a Trumpism, right? That's pretty good. That's pretty funny. Here is the European Union, and this is the structure of this. I'm comparing the European Union. Well, this tweet is comparing the European Union to the USSR, the Soviet Union, and they're saying that the European Union was modeled after the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union got to unilaterally make laws with the appearance of democracy. And I think that's exactly what we've got here. I think that's what's happening here. And we may not know because there's censorship that is very similar to England, and we're going to talk about that later in the show. And we may not know that the censorship law is already passed here because it's been decreed by Carney in his signature or whatever that is. And our parliament's null and void. Right. And I feel like our parliament may be null and void. And, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. But wouldn't that be a useful tool for the plebs, for the just general public to believe that we live in a democracy, a true democracy, when in reality we live in a dictatorship? And the dictatorship is now getting more greedy, right? And more authoritarian. Here's this guy talking about how the EU was modeled on the Soviet Union. Here we go.
The European Union is modeled on the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union claimed to be a democracy. Why? Well, it had a parliament. But the parliament had no power to actually come up with laws. All the laws were written, predetermined by the unelected Politburo. Well, that's exactly the setup they chose for the European Union.
And we started working on the digital euro.
So sadly, there are people who still love the Soviet model. Most central planners love it, and the central banks are central planners. But really what we do need is a different form of government intervention which doesn't do this micromanagement so that people then can freely act. I believe the best design is to have as many small local banks as possible, and we don't really need a central bank. The European...
Yep. I would think that that's probably true, but our structure right now is incentivized to keep things the way they are. Think about the homeless industrial complex, right? Homeless industrial complex benefits because there are homeless. If there were no homeless, the homeless industrial complex wouldn't exist. It would collapse. There wouldn't be a job. But they continue to have jobs. In fact, homelessness keeps getting worse. Maybe they're incentivized to keep that homelessness thing a problem, just enough of a problem for them to keep their job, right? And so also same with NATO. Like NATO, the whole purpose of it was to oppose the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and NATO was like, there are other problems. And people said, oh yeah, like what? And they're like, let us think about it for a little while. Definitely other problems. Fast forward to now, NATO seems to be the problem, and the United Nations too. Here's Darshan. He says, what's happening with Sean F. in various cities tells me that anti-Christian forces have the backing of the political establishment in Canada. Yes, I think that this definitely is encouraged by our leadership, by their lack of action, by their lack of anything, any kind of statement with regards to the burned churches, with regards to any of the problems that Sean's facing here, and not necessarily just this situation, but Justin Trudeau jumping all over the hijab hoax, right? But ignoring the burned churches. There's a pattern that is emerging that is undeniable at this point if you're paying any kind of attention. And that's, man, like, that's concerning, that's a concerning thing. Here's, he continues, that includes state-funded mainstream media, not just CBC, right? They're framing things in a way that is meant to make you think maybe Sean's a mega superstar. Maybe him and Trump are best buddies, like you are being manipulated to also hate Trump. And by association, this guy too. And also he's Christian, right? And that's supposed to be a negative connotation. Isn't that wild? What does our Constitution say? What does our Charter of Rights and Freedoms say, right? Which God are they referring to? Are you sure it's the Christian God, right? Are we still sure? So concerning. Charlie says, this is a man facing a hate incident, a charge because he politely asked a question about the Islamic scripture. This is in the United Kingdom. So in the UK, they have non-crime hate incidents. And this guy's getting harassed because he asked a question about Islam. This is de facto blasphemy laws. So while here in Canada, we're having people who try and organize popular worship have venues canceled, have being hassled by police, having cars rammed into their buses. In England, if you ask the wrong person an uncomfortable question, people are going to come and talk to you. If you're street preaching, they'll arrest you. If you're praying quietly in your head, not even out loud, in your head by an abortion clinic in the United Kingdom, you can be harassed by police, arrested, and removed. Unbelievable stuff. Speech and religion and the state are all tightly interwoven to achieve a result. And man, we're barreling into unbelievable times if this trend continues. Honestly, I hope I'm wrong about all of this. Charlie says, this is a man facing a hate incident charged because he politely asked a question about Islamic scripture. There are fears swirling around Westminster that we could soon have a de facto blasphemy law through the new Islamophobia definition, but this shows it's already here. Yep. And Charlie says, this is the moment that a Christian street preacher was arrested because he refused to give his details for a non-crime hate incident. Police in Rotherham detained him after he asked a Muslim woman about Islam's teaching on domestic violence, which she alleged was intimidating. So, that's intimidating me. I'm very intimidated. I don't want to be intimidated anymore. And so, arrest this man. What? Intimidating you is not against the law. Yes, it is, sir. That's a non-crime hate incident, which is now against the law, which we've deemed you've just violated. So wild stuff. I'm going to be ending the streams a little bit early. I'm going way too long. 40 minutes for the free show is way too long. So I'm going to be ending the stream before 25 minutes now. So maybe 20 minutes, but I want everybody to know about this story. But I want everybody to know about like a lot of the stories. The reason I do the long streams is because I feel like most people aren't talking about this kind of stuff, but it's just getting me in trouble with YouTube. It is, I don't actually make any money on YouTube at all. So like, it's sure I'm monetized, but I don't think they're going to actually give me any money. I think they're going to give money to everybody else, but me. They're going to say, Mark stole your ideas, and so this video is demonetized for whatever reason too. Same with Rumble. Like all of these platforms are censored anyway. So I appreciate all of you viewers. I've just got to tighten up on how much free show I put out there. Anyway, I digress. We'll continue. Bruce is talking about Doug Ford, and Doug Ford wants to have all of the migrants in hotels employed, but they shouldn't be. There's no reason for them to be here. Here's Doug Ford.
I have a tremendous amount of asylum seekers that are up in Etobicoke and in the hotels. They're healthy, they're willing to work, they're hardworking people, but they're waiting over 2 years. And they're just sucking off the system nonstop, not their fault. The fault falls under immigration, that it takes over 2 years to get a work permit. So as we're paying education, paying healthcare, paying their rent in hotels, which is exorbitant, they want to get out there and they want to be like every other Canadian. They want to find a job. They want to be able to first start off renting a condo or part of a house and then buying a house. But we're tired of waiting around. I can't wait around. It's costing our province an absolute fortune. Just last year, we were close to 100,000 asylum seekers, and I'm still waiting to get paid back from the federal government. That's one issue. But there's jobs available in Ontario, and we need to give them work permits and make sure that they're out there working and contributing back to society. I'm not waiting any longer. We're issuing work permits in Ontario for these folks to give back and contribute to society in Ontario.
What an awful plan. What a terrible plan. Mark Emery says they want a job like every other Canadian. And Mark says they are not Canadian, Doug. They are visa expired Indians who refuse to go home and are applying political pressure from the Sikh Indian community to let them stay. Yep. That's what's going on. And with that, we're going to end the stream. I don't think this is appropriate. I don't think this is a good idea. I think this is a terrible idea. And I think that what Doug Ford is doing is a betrayal to the people of Ontario and the people of Canada. He says it's an exorbitant amount of money. Yeah, it's intolerable. We shouldn't do this. Why are we doing this? Why did we approve $1 billion spending for